a gizmo. Yeah, it's more like I don't know, like a sci-fi box thingy, just with a bunch of dials. I mean, it doesn't really work. Like if you were to close it, it doesn't work. But it is cool. So I thought, and it's just a very good example of the workflow in 3D Modeler using the Boolean operation. So everything that you see here, that's pretty much what we did yesterday. In fact, this is like obviously a bit more detail. I'm just gonna open up the one from yesterday, and hopefully, yeah. No, hang on. This is another one. I've done a few of these. Cool. See if I can find it. Here we go. All right, so this is exactly what we did yesterday. Yeah. We managed to create these dials and these sliders and the speakers, essentially following the same principle of subtracting, adding, changing very basic, very primitive shapes to create this. So as a way of recap, because it's something that we didn't really cover yesterday, I want to show you how to create more details like panels and things like that before we export all of these, send it to Painter, which is this texturing software, and then we're going to texture all of this in here. So I'm just going to go ahead and cover something else that yesterday I kind of like gave you an analogy of like transparent boxes, and I think it was a little bit more confusing. That's how I understand it, but I just found a much better way to relate to the scoping in and scoping out in 3D, especially if you come from a 2D background. And I'm sure, Flynn, you will totally get it. So I'll do that after. But basically, I want to click on the clay tool. I'm going to click on a cube. And I'm going to use this one to create a nice panel. Let me bring in some reference here. This is what I had set up. So you see that difference between, let's say, this rubber sort of texture and the rest. So this is the really cool thing with Modeler. You can create anything that you want and use any tool, or not tool, any object really, to create this type of things. So I'm going to cover that. I'm going to increase this size quite a bit. There we go. And then this one down. All right. So as I did yesterday, same workflow. I'm going to press spacebar just to add it. Right, so now we have a new object. I'm going to press escape to get out. So this is the scoping in and out that I mentioned. I'm going to select it and bring this down here. Maybe scale it a bit more. Cool. All right, so now that I have this, I'm just going to duplicate it, and I'm going to start rotating things around, right? So I'm going to hold Control and D to duplicate that cube, push it up, and I'm just going to rotate it maybe 45 degrees, seems to be all right. And I'm going to use this gizmo to push it like so. There we go. And I'm going to press the space bar. Oh, actually, before I do that, no, actually, that's fine. I was just duplicating. So I'm going to select it again. Control D to duplicate it one more time. And I'm probably doing this not the best way possible, but this will give you a good recap of what we did yesterday. Okay, so we have these, and these objects. I'm going to actually move them up so that you can see what I did. So this is another way of constructing elements that then you can use to subtract or cut or do whatever you want, right? So there's probably an easy way to do what I just did here, which would be if I click, right, select my cube and use the taper to create that sort of like angle. So you can totally do that. Right. And then you can press the space bar, and then you can hold the space bar and move this up, then left, then up. So you can do the same thing, right? I'm going to delete that one. Just wanted to show you that you can use very, very basic shapes like 3 cubes to create that sort of tapering effect or that line. Yeah. So now I can take all of these things, right click and click on merge. So that is going to combine everything into a single object. And then I can use this object with booleans to cut or to create that cut. So I'm going to right click, and I'm going to use, in the boolean operation, I'm going to use the the split. So this split section, I'm going to click on that,
and it turns this familiar to those like 2D designers, right, that you were talking about before. Like that's something
right, like the in illustration and yeah. So the same thing. So this one is going to basically, the yellow one is going to split that section. So I'm going to bring this down to somewhere around there. I think that's fine. And we can scale it down a bit and reposition it. So you feel it's right. And then I'm going to select only the area or the object that I want to subtract or cut into. So I'm going to select this one, right click, and I'm going to apply it. So it's going to take anything that you have set as subtraction, intersection, or whatever, and it's going to apply it to this object that I have selected. That's it. So now I'm going to take this one and delete it, or you can reuse it somewhere else with a different angle or whatever. But now you see that we have this really nice panel, this nice cut, and those things are separate, right? So you can maybe increase the size of this a tiny bit, push it down if you want to, or up. So that's a very simple way to create a bit more of like visual interest, to add some details with panels. And that's the last thing that I wanted to show you in terms of the workflow. The rest is more of the same, just using basic objects, subtracting, adding, before we move into texturing. Now, before we go into that, I wanna cover the scope in and out, because again, I mentioned that in order to, let's say, edit the screen, right now we are in scene assembly, so I can take it and move it about and change the size, all of that. But if I want to edit this, I have to double click it, and you'll see it gives me the latest object that I used before. I'm going to click on selection, and let's go ahead and reset that one. So this one allows me to edit just this object. So I can press tab to remove it, right? So I can remove this bit if I press the spacebar, but I'm just editing this little bit, right? Okay. And that's the idea of the scoping in and out.
So you can't like accidentally start subtracting from the other shape. So the more complex you get, you have full control of that. You can just jump in
exactly.
And change a single object.
If you wanna subtract, let's say from this and this at the same time, the easiest way is to create a new object. So that's selecting the clay. But by default, if you don't have anything selected, it's going to allow you to create a new object, right? Whereas if you double click on this one, you enter in this edit mode, it's only going to affect that. So the easiest thing to think about it, now that I was thinking about a better way to explain it, in Photoshop, which you will be more familiar with, so let me just jump back into Photoshop, it is basically the same thing as smart objects, right? So you have your scene assembly, this is your Photoshop document, you can move things around, you can scale things like that, right? So basically the Photoshop things, right? But if you want to edit, let's say, this cube and you want to make it a different color or a different shape, you need to go to the smart object, double click it, then you enter in this one, and then maybe let's do something slightly different, right? Yeah. You save, and then the scope out, which will be pressing escape, will be to close this document and it be updated. So it's the same thing as, I think this is a much better reference of scoping in and out. It's just like each one of the elements that you create in Modular is ultimately like a smart object. So to edit that smart object, you double click to get in, edit it, add it, whatever, and then press escape bar to go back to the main document, let's say, or the scene assembly. Cool. So hopefully that makes more sense.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I hope you guys watching that. It also reminds me a bit about like Illustrator and kind of grouping things, because you've got the visual version of it, but sometimes you'll have kind of shapes within shapes and groups within groups and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much it. And that's slightly different from the scoping in and out, just because you can have pretty much like in Photoshop. So let's say the main element is, if you want to edit it, you go in and that's your smart object. But then within the smart object, you can have, a group, right? Or two groups. Yep. And that is slightly different because here the groups are more like to be able to move and manipulate multiple smart objects at the same time, let's say. So if I want to move this entire base, I can select all of the pieces that make that base and then right click and click on group. And that way I can just push the entire thing. Yeah, cool. That's the difference. But then within the group, I select that I need to go into the group to edit each one of these elements. But anyway, hopefully that kind of like makes sense. I just want to move forward and show you how to take something like this and export it so that you can texture it. Because this is one of my favorite things about this software and the connectivity with the Adobe 3D apps, that it just sort of like removes all of that technicality that sometimes prevents people from getting into 3D or having fun with it, really. And I would say this, I use these apps for prototyping or doing like tests, quick tests. These are not production ready asset, but it's so much faster to create something like this. Make sure that it works, validate the idea, make sure that it gets approved or whatever, and then you can take this as your starting point, and then you can refine it with more time in other apps. But as a prototyping tool, this is absolutely fantastic. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave it as it is. I'm not going to touch anything. Again, this is what you end up with after playing around with the booleans. I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to click on Export. Right. So this is pretty cool. Now, there are a few presets. You can play around with a few of these. You can send this straight to Blender, Maya, Painter, whatever. I'm just going to select Painter because that's kind of like in the in the design process, I would say this is the next step. So you have your model. The next step is to texture it. So that would be done in 3D Painter. I've already done that, but don't worry, I'll cover this. So this is Painter, just so you know. I already have the asset in here, but this is the goal.
Render, which can sometimes go crazy on streams. So that's great.
Yeah, I mean, with the stager, it's pretty good. So hopefully we'll get to that. But so the idea is to select the preset, and that's it. I'm going to select this as Painter. That's what I'm going to go for. FBX, that's my preferred method. Also, you can use USD, which is, pretty helpful as well. But I'm used to FBX, so I'll just, for a personal preference, I just use FBX now. Then you can also select all layers or selection. That is, for example, if you export this. Let me cancel this for a second. Let's say that you export this, and for some reason there are some areas that they don't look that perfect, or there's something weird with it. You can just say, okay, I'm going to re-export just the screen, or I'm just re-export just this knob. So you can go with that selection, export, and then select this, and that way you can only export one thing. But I'm going to export all the layers. In the polygon type, again, you can go for anything you want, but just to simplify the process, just go for quads, because that's going to give you a cleaner topology. And again, you don't have to do anything other than selecting quads. The exporting process will take care of the whole retopology and creating the nice base so that you can texture. Again, that's very easy. So quads, the adaptive factor, I prefer to keep it at 100. I think by default is something like 50 or something like that. The cool thing about the adaptive factor is that depending on how many details you have in your model, it will adapt to add more or less points in certain areas when it exports it. So personally, I think 100 is just best, but you can change, you can play around with this. There's some visual references when you export it and you see, okay, maybe I need more resolution here or less. You can play with that factor, but in general, just keep it simple. Quads, 100%. And then the polygon count, this is roughly what you want to end up with. So 60,000 polygons, that is a pretty good amount, but that's going to be, relatively low. So for example, things like rounded shapes might be a little bit too jagged, like the edges will be a little bit too, polygonal. So if you want to have a high fidelity object, I would recommend go for, something like 500, 600,000, and this is still something that is pretty decent for a Painter or anything else to handle. So just go for something high. I'm going to say here that in a much more advanced, well, not much more, but like a slightly more advanced workflow, you can export the raw mesh, which is exactly what you see in Painter. So it will give you exactly what you see. And then you can export a low version with quads and then do the baking process. But I'm not going to get into that. We're going to keep things very, very simple. Right. So just go for a high amount here. The higher the amount, the heavier the file, but the more accurate would be, or the closer to what you have here in Painter. Now, the very cool thing about this is that it can generate UVs. And generating UVs means that it takes the model, the 3D model, and it unwraps it so that anything in 2D can, or like any software can understand the layout in 2D. It's kind of like creating a map for the 3D environment. Like, that's the easiest thing to think about it. Okay. But again, there's no technicality. All you have to do is say, yes, please generate UVs. If you forget to do this, you can also do it from Painter when you import it. So either or is fine. And the last thing that I would say is if you have done anything with color, painting or anything, you can click on vertex color. That will export the color. But in my case, I want to do all of that in Painter. So that's pretty much it. So you just click export. I'm not going to do it. I already have the FBX ready. So you can just export and just wait. It takes a few minutes to generate the quads or the new topology, the UVs and all of that, and exports. So I'll leave it as it is. Okay. And let's go ahead and switch to Painter. Here we go. And in Painter, in fact, you know what? I'm gonna start from scratch. Again.
Okay, cool. I'll take this moment to just mention that we are live. So if anyone has any questions, throw them in chat. If you're new here, we can take questions as we're kind of rolling along with Pablo. So any questions around 3D, we're live on Behance, we're live on YouTube. Let us know.
Yep, happy to take any questions along the way. All right, so I'm just going to restart this to show you that how you can import things. You can create a new project, or you can literally just drag and drop the FBX into the viewport. That's it. The only thing that I want to show you from this sort of like setup of new project is that you can click on auto unwrap. This is the same thing that we did from 3D Modeler to unwrap to create the UVs at the time of export. But because I already done that, there is no need. So I'm just going to click on that and click OK. And just going to discard that. There we go. So same thing. I just have my object in here. One of the first things that I like to do is just change the camera angle because it's a little bit too distorted. So to do that, you can click on this sort of monitor icon here and then click on the camera. So I'm going to change the field of view, something like that. So it's a little bit more like orthographic type of thing.
Right.
That's about it, really. Like you can start like texturing your object. So I'm gonna give you a quick overview of how things are set up in case you've never used Painter before. But again, it's super simple. It's kind of like an extension of Photoshop in a way, but in 3D. So on the left-hand side, by the way, this is my custom UI, so you might see things like the panels in a different way, but it doesn't really matter. You have the library, so you have your materials, you have your brushes here, you have effects, you have textures, you have masks, you have a bunch of really cool things all in this library, and you can filter by any of these icons right here. On the right-hand side, you have all your layers, exactly the same as in Photoshop. You can create groups, mask, all of that good stuff. You have the texture set list. This is basically how many objects you have in the scene. Right now, I have a single object, so everything that like any material that I throw in will be applied to the entire thing. So we're going to have to work with masks. That's about it. Then you have the properties of whatever you have selected. So right now I just have this brush. It looks a little bit like daunting or like overwhelming because there's a lot of options, but again, it's very simple once you get to know the basics. But these are the properties of whatever you have selected. So right now I have my brush. I can click on this one, for example, and you see it just changes to something a lot simpler. And it shows you this is the topology that 3D Modeler created. So it is a pretty decent topology for a quick concept. Again, I want to mention that it is not like production ready. It's not perfect if you want to work on a, I don't know, game or something like that. But for a quick prototype, it is absolutely fantastic. There are like a few things that can be improved that I noticed. So let's say this rounded shape, this cylinder could be a little bit better. And there's something hidden here. You know, this area that could be improved, but overall, this is a fantastic effort for like an automated tool, right? So
Cool, yeah.
Anyway, I just wanted to show you that those are the properties of whatever I have selected here. Then you have the texture set list. I'm going to come back to this, and then you have the shader editor. So the shader settings is basically the quality or the type of the material, or have the render or like the computer render stuff. So don't worry too much about this unless you want to do something fancy like subsurface scattering or translucency, that sort of thing. Although, you know, if for something like this is pretty basic. So I'm going to go back to the texture set settings. So the texture set settings are essentially the settings of the entire set of textures that you're going to create. So to keep things very simple, when you open your file, drag and drop it into Painter, the first thing that I do and that you should do is create the bake maps. Now, I'm going to show you something so that it puts into perspective how important those things are. So let's find something like this brass that I think that's come with Painter. I'm going to drag and drop it, and that's it. So it just like projects that into the entire object. And actually, let me do that. I'm going to do a smart object, a smart material instead. So there's a couple of differences. These are the smart materials. These ones, sorry, these are the materials, the basic materials.
Right.
These are the smart materials.
Okay.
So the smart materials have like a bunch of layers. We'll get to that in a second. I'm just gonna plastic.
I've got questions, but I think you're setting yourself up to answer the questions, so I'm not gonna let you keep going.
Yeah, I'll just set them up and then I'll cover them because please let me know how we're doing with time, because I know that I'm speaking a little bit fast because I want to cover a lot of things.
Yeah.
But I can slow it down.
We're not halfway yet. Okay, so it's all good.
Brilliant. Good. Okay, so I'm just gonna take this plastic dusty. You might have access to this or not. I can't remember. I have created a bunch of these materials myself, so I can't remember which one is which. So I'm just going to drag and drop it and show you the importance of the bake maps. Cool. So you see that as smart material, all it is just a folder. This is what I have here, exactly like in Photoshop. If I open it up, it has a paint layer, a couple of paint layers, and with masks. So if I turn them off, you see it starts with a very basic color with some like little speckles of dust. Then it has these dirt edges, and then it has this extra dust. Now, the importance of the bake maps is that these masks are actually very, very important. And what they do is they look at the roundness of the object, like the crevices automatically for you, and applies the layer or the effect in that section. So right now the software doesn't really know where those rounded edges are, or like where's the top, where's the bottom, and that's why this looks a little bit awful. So if we click on Bake Mesh Maps, which is, again, as a quick recap, you drag and drop your object into Painter, you adjust the camera if you want. This is the next thing that you should do. Click on Bake Mesh Maps, and it opens this window. Now, for this workflow, just to keep things simple, all you have to do is click on this checkbox, use low poly mesh as a high poly mesh. So it's going to use the same object to calculate everything that it needs to calculate. And the output size, make sure that it's something like 496. That is the size of your texture. So the larger, the better, so that you have more details, basically. Like in Photoshop, the more resolution, the better. And that's it. Don't touch anything else, and click on Bake Selected Textures. So now Painter is going to go through the process of analyzing the mesh, and you see this colorful sort of thing. That's called the normal map, so that it basically knows where the y-axis is, the z-axis, and all of that, so we can apply a bunch of textures. Cool. That's it. So it takes a few seconds. We can click on Return to Painting Mode, and you see how it updates everything nicely.
Oh, wow.
Right? Because now the software knows where let's say the ambient occlusion is, the crevices, and we can dynamically adjust all of this. So I can, let's say, turn this off just for the time being. Click on the Mask Builder, and because I have the Mask Builder selected, which is one of the generators, I can click on the properties. So remember, the properties is just whatever I have selected. Depending on what I select, it just changes. So yeah, it's contextual, exactly. So this is what it is. I can take the level, I can reduce that and change the dirtiness, or increase that, so we can make it really old or new plastic. I can add contrast. I can reduce the contrast. So it's very, very intuitive in that way. And it's non-destructive, meaning that, let's say that I'm going to go for this. I can take my base, which is a fill layer. We're going to come back to this in just a second, but I'm going to take this base layer, click on the color, like a color swatch, and say, I'm going to make this kind of like a yellowish green military sort of thing. There we go. So now we have this green color. One thing that I should mention is you can click Shift and right click to rotate the light around. Oh, cool. So you can see things a little bit better. And then, after changing the color of the plastic, maybe the dust or this dirtiness is a little bit too light. So I can click on the layer that has the dirt, and I can click on it and say, let's make it a bit darker. So it's very intuitive in that way. I'm gonna enable the other one, and that's it. We have the base for our plastic ready to go. So I wanted to get to this point before, opening the space for questions. Happy to answer anything up to this point, and then I'll show you how to build the materials and create masks and make it, have a lot of fun with this.
Yeah, cool. I don't think there's any questions from chat. Let me just double check. But if there are any, throw them in. You haven't missed your chance, so just throw them in. But my question was, you were talking about textures and whether they come with substance or not. Can you get new textures other than the ones that are shipped, and how's that kind of work?
Yeah, so you can get textures, but I think what I was referring to are more like materials. So the main difference between textures and materials. Yeah, no, but like you can have textures, absolutely. So I should have explained that. A material is basically made out of multiple textures, usually. Right. So one texture that, in fact, I'll show you. So you see that I'm going to go into full screen mode here. You see that this dropdown says material. If I click on it, I can actually go to base color. This will be a texture. So it's just color, diffuse color. There's no shading information. There's no light. It's only basically the color and the diffuse color, right? There is another texture that is called metallic. Right now, there's nothing metallic, so it's black. If there was something metallic, it will be white. The roughness, that's how rough the surface is, and this is a black and white texture. So if you want to make something really shiny, for example, like plastic, you will make it black, and if you want something to be completely rough or rougher like concrete, you would make it fully white. That's why you see that the areas that are like dusty or dirty, those are like generally less specular or less reflective. So those are white, and anything else is kind of like an in-between gray, and there's a nice variation in there. Yeah. So those are textures, right? And all of those things, all of those textures, normal, roughness, all of that, those make up the material. And that's why let's do that straight away.
So you have like all of
and then
those
I'll answer your
leathers,
question.
Like it's multi-layered, like there's so much going on.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think I haven't answered your question. I'll answer your question first. You can go to this icon right here, which is Browse 3D Assets in Marketplace. And if you click on that one, it will open up the Adobe library. There's like hundreds and hundreds of, everything like textures, materials, smart materials, mask, everything in there. It's really, really cool. So to explain that question a little bit, or the answer, if I click on a new fill layer, which is this one right here, in fact, let's actually just don't waste time and let's make a different material for this area right here, like a grip sort of thing.
Right.
So when I click on a fill layer, this is kind of like creating a fill layer in Photoshop, exactly the same thing. And this is what I was talking about. So right now, this is a white material, kind of like a white plastic material, right? And then you have all those layers that I was mentioning, or like different, they're called channels, but like properties of the material. So you can control all of from here. So let's say I'm gonna go for a black color, or like slightly gray. So it's just changing the color, nothing else. But then you have the metallic, so I can make it fully metallic. So this is now a metallic piece, or I can make it, plastic in a way, right? So you can just play around with this. Usually there is no in between with metallic, as in there's no like an object that is semi-metallic or semi-plastic. You either have non-dielectric or dielectric materials. But this allows you to play around with this. At the end of the day, it's just an authoring software, so it's pretty cool. The roughness is you can make it concrete look like, or like matte painting sort of thing, or you can just push it all the way down, and this is like super reflective and shiny, reflecting the environment, right? So it's very easy to control the properties of the material. That's what I call like the different textures, really. The normal, this is just the one that allows you to see a bunch of details, so I'll leave this one for later. And then the hide, again, you can change this, but at the moment there is no texture as attached to it, because we haven't done that. But yeah, this allows you to set up this. So I'm gonna go for something that is pretty rough, and yeah, I'm gonna leave this. I don't know if this is easy to see in the stream, so I'm just gonna go for a blue color for the time being. And the great thing, like I said, this is non-destructive. We can change that after, but so that you can see what I'm doing. All right. So now that I have this, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a folder so I can have multiple things, and whatever I put into that folder is going to be restricted to whatever I create a mask. So I'm gonna select my layer. We can call it base grip or something, and I'm gonna hold Control and G, or right click and group, or you can click on this icon right here, and same thing, just drag and drop them in. So this is a folder, same thing like in Photoshop, you would create a folder, and I'm gonna call this one grip, and you can give it, colors. All of this is very similar to Photoshop, right?
Yeah.
You just have all these things in there. Now, like in Photoshop, you can create masks so that you can reveal or hide certain parts of this, folder, the entire folder. So I can turn this on and off. So you see, this is the plastic, but now I have the grip, and I want to apply it in certain areas. Now I'm going to click on this icon right here. This is the same thing as creating a mask in Photoshop, in Photoshop, or I guess Illustrator. I'm not too versed in Illustrator, so I assume it's similar. Yeah. So here you can click on white mask or black mask. I'm going to click on black mask. So this is going to hide, obviously, everything, right? So you have your black mask in here. Now, the really, really cool thing about the masks in Painter, and that's kind of like one of the backbones, I think, of the entire software, is that you can build the complexity of that mask with individual, they're called effects, but individual kind of like mini layers within the mask. So with the mask selected, that is, highlighted with a little outline of blue, you can click on this magic one, and you can say, give me a paint, right? So this means that I can take whatever brush I have selected, I can start doing this, and you see it just reveals that material.
Yeah.
But if I make a mistake, it's not painted in the mask itself. It's just this. So I can turn this on and off. I can change the opacity of just this bit, or I can delete it altogether, and still, it won't affect the general mask. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Add a paint, right? But instead of painting manually like this, because it would be like pretty hard to try to get this like so, right? We can use what is called the UV island. So this is probably the only technical thing that I'm going to mention, and I'm going to try to keep it as
So just before we get onto the UV island, because I feel like we're moving on to a little thing, there was a question before. I'm just going to ask. Luis was asking, can you add a texture to the dark dust instead of the dust? That was from a little bit before.
Yes, right. You can.
Cool.
You can make even a material. Doesn't have to be a layer. You can. I think I will show you this with what I'm gonna do. So hopefully what I'm gonna do next shows like or answers that question. But yeah, you can totally do that.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and instead of painting this manually, there is this tool. I'm gonna also go into full screen, and here at the top you have this drop down that allows you to switch between 3D and 2D, or just 3D or just 2D. Yeah. So if I click on 3D and 2D, it opens the map. So this is the UV that was created when we exported the object from 3D model, right? So all of these things in here, in fact, let me turn this off so that it's easy to see just in white. Kind of. You see that as I move the light, holding shift and right click, it reacts the same way in 2D as in 3D. So for example, these little dials here, those are probably these things here. It's not the greatest thing, but it will work. So you see, it has like the same effect. It's just that this is, or these UV islands, these little sections here, is what the software uses to know how to wrap a texture around it. Right.
Yeah, it's
so
super
if I
weird.
paint,
it looks super weird.
Yeah, it's really weird.
Like if you're not used to it,
it is weird.
It's like if you show that to someone, you're like, "Hey, what's this?" You'll be like, "I got no idea what's going on." It's kind of interesting. It is like everything's flattened out, but like spread out.
Exactly.
Across this square.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. But you're right. Like it's a weird thing if you're not used to it or you're new to it.
Yeah.
And especially because this one is not the cleanest UV, but it is functional. It works. But maybe I'll show you something. If I go ahead and start painting with 3D, 2D around this area, something around here, is one of these ones. Here we go. This is the second one.
Yeah.
So you see how I'll do it in real time. So if I paint something here at the top, if I want to add like a little texture, a little dial, I'll paint here and it will be in there. So that's how the software knows how to continue things. And you don't really need to know, you don't really need to spend too much time on the 2D because it just works exactly the same in 3D. It's just that for what I'm going to show you to isolate parts using the tool that I'm going to show you, it's kind of like good to know that everything is kind of like being split into little pieces. So let's go ahead and go back to 3D now. So with this paint selected, instead of using the paintbrush, I can use something else. Like you have the path tool, you have this polygon tool, same thing as in Photoshop, you can have like the paint bucket, that sort of thing. So I'm gonna select this, which is the polygon fill. So when I select that, the properties are pretty simple. So you can select triangles or squares. So if I go closer here, there might be some triangles, I don't know. I'm just gonna go ahead and click on one. So you see, I'm just like painting a tiny little square. So this will take ages, right? But then there's also this one that is the mesh fill. In this case, we have an entire mesh, so this is not gonna work. But then we have the UV islands or like the UV check. So you can click on this one and anything that is part of that UV island will be painted. So in this case, the software sort of like cut it here. All I need to do is just click on this next one and it will update. So I'm just gonna do all of that. Make sure that, yeah, that's it. So that's pretty much it. Maybe the grip will be also good to add it maybe here, just for fun.
Right, as if it was
so
manufactured out of the same texture, like anything that your hands touching. Yeah, that's cool. I like that.
This one probably is like a metallic one, but I just want to show you that this one is being split into multiple little pieces, but that's all right. It's just a matter of like selecting them all. Just be careful because you might instinctively go, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and do that. But if you do this, everything else gets painted. Yeah. Now, if you do that, let's say you go for this, you can invert the color. At the end of the day, you're painting with black and white. So right now it is white. If I set it to black, I can just do this and then recover everything that I did here.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing in Photoshop, right?
Yeah, exactly.
One extra thing, if you don't like, I personally don't like the red color with the wireframe. It's a bit too bright. You can go to the display settings here. And if you scroll down, there is this section called Show Wireframe. I like to go for a dark blue or almost black color. So it's a little bit, easy to
easier
on the eye.
Eyes if you're
and then you can
on
change the, yeah, especially if there's something very dense that has a lot of points, and you can change the opacity as well.
Cool.
Right? Yeah. So that's basically how you build a mask. Okay. So now we have, this material, which is currently only one single layer in there. applied. And if I, like in Photoshop, if you press the Alt key, you can go into the mask and you can visualize the mask in 3D. So you see, there's a tiny bit in here that I should just paint. Oops, with
that was
black.
From when you selected everything before and then minused it.
Yeah, because it just uses like the camera, kind of like a projection thing. Oh. But that way you can see it. And another really cool thing is that, like in Photoshop, if you press the Shift key and left click on the mask, it basically hides it so you can see everything, right? So that's a really cool thing. All right. So now let's make this into a more interesting material, right? And hopefully this will answer the question about adding textures and all of that. So I'm going to create a new texture or a new fill layer. So this is the base. I'm going to create a new layer, right? So you see, because it is within the group, it is limited to only the mask that the group has, pretty basic. And I'm just going to I'm going to close this and I'm going to go to this icon right here. And this is basically a bunch of textures. Most of them come with Painter. I've just downloaded a few extra and I have from my own library a few, but let's go ahead and search for something like Voronoi or like noise. Maybe noise is fine. Yeah, so you have a bunch of these and this comes with Painter. So I think maybe these cells too, right? So this is a texture that you can also create in Photoshop. You can create a tileable texture. You can download textures that are tileable. And for this case, or in this case, as long as it is black and white, you can just drag and drop it into your resources and it will be in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one and I'm going to add a mask to this layer. So let's go ahead and create a mask first for the fill layer. So same thing, black mask. I'm doing this manually, but you can, like Painter nowadays is a lot more intelligent. So I can do this all manually, creating a fill layer and all of that. Or you can just click and drag it into, and you see how as I drag, it just gives me these things to add the, the mask into. So I click on that, and what it does, instead of like filling the entire mask, it just creates this fill layer. So this is one of the effects that you can find from here. So instead of just painting, which is what we used before, we can use an add fill. An add fill is kind of like having a fill layer within the mask of the fill layer. That makes sense. So little fill layer, but these ones are only black and white because obviously we're just affecting the mask, right?
Right.
But that's pretty much it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change the UV projection, which is essentially projecting the texture on the 2D space, that weird thing that I showed you before, to triplanar projection. So this is going to be like a little box that you can see there. So what the software is doing is taking that square texture, that cells texture, and from every angle of that box is projecting it so that it is nice and clean for the most part. Right. There's some some edges here that, this is where it starts to sort of like fade in, but you can control the hardness of that, like how much it fades into. If it is too hard, you will see the seam or like the cut. So, something in between is fine. And then you have the tiling. So it's how many times this texture is tiled on itself. So you can click on tiling and increase that, right?
Cool. Yeah, that's amazing.
Create that. And let's go closer here so I can see what's happening. So I'm going to increase that even more, like so, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this main fill layer, right? Click on it again. And that's where you can control how metallic it is and all of that. So the cool thing about Painter as well is that you can influence properties of a fill layer independently. So put it simply, you can just go ahead and say, I'm only interested in the height information or detail information of this layer. So I can click on this and turn them all off. So you see that there is no roughness, there is no metallic, anything that this layer is contributing to, only the height. Yeah. And I can take this slider and I can push it, and that creates this sort of like nice effect, right? So, and I can, it reacts to light and all of that. So that's really, really cool. That's so I have that sort of grippling thing. And then we can go ahead and if it is a little bit too harsh, like those cuts, that's too maybe unrealistic, we can blur it a little bit. So we can, to the mask itself, remember that I just had a fill layer, in other words, I can also, in the magic one, I can click on effects or filters, sorry. And in the filters, right now, I have that selected, but it says empty. So you can click on this and select a bunch of different filters. So the one that I use the most is blur, for example. So it is just like in Photoshop, like a Gaussian blur type of thing. I can click on that and you see it disappears, but just because it is too intense, I'm gonna lower that intensity a little bit. That's a bit better. It's creating like a weird distortion here. on the blurriness. Maybe it is too much.
Yes,
There we go.
counterintuitive, I would think, to want to blur something to make it like look realistic, but I can see how it benefits.
Well, yeah, I guess it's true. But if you want to create like that sort of like bumpy surface, you can do it with blurriness just to make it a bit more. I mean, there's other stuff like you can warp it. So if I type warp, the warp effect, see how it just changes sort of like that volcanic sort of lava thing. Maybe here's a little bit easier to see what it's doing.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that you can do. I think this is not too bad.
It's cool. Yeah, it's great.
It's like a little bit of a weird stretching. That has to do with the way that the UV has been created, but that's just a matter of redoing the UVs. Okay, so let's say that you have built this mask like so, right? And at some point you said, you know what, this is not giving me the effect that I want. It's not creating that sort of gripping effect that I want. All you have to do is, let's say, turn this off, go back to the cells that I created and drag and drop a different one. So you can drag and drop this in here and it just gets updated. It's like, nah, that's not what I want. Let's do something like this.
That's replacing
that's getting closer.
It, not adding it to it, right? That's
replacing it. Yeah.
Wow,
it's replacing it, but it maintains it's replacing it, but maintaining the tiling and all of that. So you can just play around with this. And I can say, okay, this one actually is not too bad. It's giving me kind of like what I want. But it's not as intense. So again, going back to the properties of the layer, again, right now I only have the height, so I can push this forward a bit and say, okay, that looks a bit more interesting, but it's too noisy. So I'm gonna enable the, I'm gonna change the warp back to blur, just to make it subtle. And I think that's one of the main things with texturing in 3D. It's all about the subtleties. So I spend a lot of time just like fine tuning these tiny things, just to make sure that it feels fine. All right, so those are very simple things with a couple of layers. But because it is non-destructive, I can go ahead and say, give me this layer, and I'm gonna make it black or dark gray. So now I have that grip. And then, hopefully to answer the question, if I wanna use a custom, texture for the roughness, which at the moment is pretty uniform, it's like a rough plastic. It's kind of like hard to see now, but I can click on a new layer, right? All within that folder. And this time I'm going to only use affect the roughness, right? So I'm going to press the Alt key, and that's the same thing to toggle everything manually. But if you press the Alt key and click, it just sort of like toggles everything but the one that you click. That is kind of like the same to click on layers in Photoshop to select that object, basically.
Right.
And that's it. We can just move this around to change the roughness, but you can add a texture to variate that roughness. And so that, for example, if you have like a greasy finger and then just grab the whole thing, that obviously is going to be more reflective or shiny than other parts. So just like I did with the height, we can also call it details. And this one, I'm going to call it shiny part. For this one, I'm going to create a black mask and then the fill object. Right? So now we have this in the properties of that. We have a slot to just drag and drop anything. So I'm going to type grunge here, grunge, and could be anything, something with enough contrast. Maybe this one, grunge leaks. I'm going to drag and drop it in there. Make sure that I have the UV projection set to, or the projection set to triplanar for that sort of box effect. And I'm going to press the Alt key to visualize what this is doing. So here we go. Now, one thing that I didn't mention is that when you have triplanar projection, you can actually use this gizmo that you can access here from the top to move it, rotate it, or scale it. So I can, instead of using the tiling, I can just scale this like so, and then use the move tool to just position it. And then this texture, depending on which texture you use, it will vary. Sometimes they don't have parameters, especially if you create your own texture and drag and drop it, you will only see this bit right here. You won't see anything to change the texture, but I can increase the balance. This is just the balance in Photoshop, and add a bit of contrast like so that I can visualize exactly what I want. Maybe rotate that texture like that, and then check everything. So you see, as I rotate my light around, not everything is kind of like the same roughness, but because it's non-destructive, I can still change it and say, let's tweak it a little bit or make it really, really shiny in some areas, almost like it's wet, in a way.
Yeah, it
But
does.
like I said, it's all about the subtlety. So I just prefer to keep it simple like that, and there's a tiny bit of variation in there. All right, so that's just the process of building kind of like a custom material. I don't really like it now in this dial, so all I have to go and do is go back to my paint layer. Remember, this is the one that is giving me this mask, and just literally change it or change the color. That's it.
Cool. Easy.
All right, so I'm gonna show you a couple more techniques to just drag and drop materials. This is kind of like building one from scratch. So we have the grip material, right? So, and that is made out of like 3 layers. One that has everything, another one that just has height information that you can just keep changing like so. And another one that just changes the shininess or roughness. But now I'm gonna show you how to use the materials that come with the library. Unless there is any questions so far about what I'm showing you.
I'll just let you know that we've got about 6 or 7 minutes left. It goes really fast. I know.
All right.
I give you, let you know that. So,
all right, let's do something then. I'm going to show you how to drag and drop things, and then I'll show you the final product and how to render it in 2 seconds. All right, so the smart materials, I'm going to type something like metal, like this one, and I'm just going to drag and drop it into the whole thing. You see, it just gives me this nice sort of like painted metal. So maybe that's going to be the top bit. So let's add a black mask. I'm going to repeat the same process that I show you, but very quickly. Add paint, add polygon fill. I'm going to select this whole thing to be the red sort of metal thing. That one as well.
Is that pretty common that you start like from the main, like just the background more or less, like the main material first, and then kind of build it, you know?
Sometimes. I guess like I like to build things myself from scratch, but sometimes for things like this is like just a quick and easy way to visualize something. And because everything comes in layers, I can say, okay, the red one doesn't really go with this, so I'm just gonna change it to a darker sort of green in a way.
Yeah.
And the rust or whatever this is, the dirt, I'm also gonna change it to make it a bit less obvious, like so. And now we have this sort of like military sort of thing. But it's just a matter of finding what you want. I'm gonna find another metal. Like this aluminum, and just drag it to, well, everything, and then use a black mask. Same thing, paint, polygon fill, and I'm gonna add it to this. So after you get the hang of this sort of like workflow, this is really easy to just go ahead and mask areas that you wanna reveal or show a material, and that is pretty much it. Like you can see, I just have a bunch of different masks that are applied to different areas of the model. But yeah, it's just drag and drop from the library. You can have plastic. This fiberglass is pretty cool and it's green. So let's just add it to the knobs here. Same thing.
That's cool. Yeah, it's interesting. It's not how I thought you would have necessarily done it. You kind of add it to everything, and then just like in Photoshop, creating a mask over the top for what you do want, and that's kind of the fastest process, which is really interesting to me.
It is the fastest way in this case, but also keep in mind that is because of the non-destructive nature of the workflow, because you can reveal and say like, you know what, we actually, and you can have it in multiple paint layers. So you can create another one and say, I want to see how this looks if this sort of like, you know, card here is the same color. That looks cool, but this is like separate, and I can just call it card, and this one dials. So I know that this is different from this, and I can just even change this to be multiply, for example, to make it darker, right? Or overlay, right? To change the how things look in just this individual effect, or just change the, you know, the opacity, right? Yeah. But it's driven by the same sort of material. So you can just, you know, change the color and it will affect everything.
That's awesome.
Right?
That's so cool.
So very powerful stuff. All right, so let me know if there's any questions while I load the most recent one.
Cool. No questions from chat. I think a lot of people like me are just kind of mesmerized because you're jumping through so much. There's so much to absorb, and often when that's the case, like I'm just sort of sitting here like I don't want to interrupt because you're explaining so much so well. So yeah, that's how I feel.
Oh, feel free to interrupt me. I just like I tend to talk a lot, but just because I get excited about this type of things, and I want to share like all the tips so that it is not just like, oh, this is a cool thing, but you can actually just take something away and do it.
Oh yeah, it's infectious. Yeah, for sure. Like how passionate you are about it. And then I think also it's one of those ones where go back and watch back slowly and go, cool, what did Pablo say here? Like, it's just full of all these crazy tips, which is great.
Cool.
Yeah, awesome.
All right, let me just open this one. There we go.
Cool. Oh, so this is a one you've completed earlier.
That's the one that I have ready for showing you how to render this out.
Awesome.
But you see, I just want to cover, it's exactly the same thing. So let's say the glass visor, is just a little mask that has a couple of materials that I can change them all. Same thing with these colors. I mean, we don't really have time, but to change the color, you can use the same thing like in Photoshop. So you can go to the effects here and type perceptive, the HSL perceptive, like hue saturation value. You can drag that on top, let's say, of this is the glass visor screen thingy. And then you have the hue saturation like in Photoshop. So you can just make that screen a different color.
Like that,
yeah. So it's pretty useful. Maybe reduce the saturation.
I've only got about a minute and a half left, I think, Pablo. So you might want to show the export bit if we don't want to.
Okay. This is the cool thing. There's no need to export. So once you have your textures ready, all you have to do is click on File, click on Send to, and click on Send Substance 3D Stager to Substance 3D Stager. So I'm gonna do that just to show you how it works. It does everything for you. So it takes your model. It opens, obviously, 3D Stager. It takes your model, your textures, sets everything up in 3D, like the materials and all the properties that you set up in Painter, and it's going to, why not? It should do it. Let's go ahead and do it again. Maybe because I have to have it open. Unless it's like no, but it should be okay. That's weird.
Just because we're live.
It's because we're live, but it shouldn't do that. I did that before and it was working. I think it's because
that's what it normally does.
That's what it normally does, and it's because I updated my driver, so it might be that. So sorry about that.
Just before I'm gonna. That's okay. We'll just have to trust you on that one because we are going to run out of time, and I don't want to run out of time.
That's okay. I think this is it.
There it is. It's there really small. That's awesome.
There we go.
All right, we'll have to leave
just
there,
drag and
Pablo.
drop
We're
it
going to run out of time, buddy. I'm very sorry. But there
all
we go.
Good, all good.
That's where it exists. Thank you so much for yesterday and today, everybody. I hope you enjoyed our time here with Pablo in Painter. If you missed yesterday, go check that out. It'll be live on YouTube. Pablo, thank you so much. We'll have to have you back on. So much to cover.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me. Hopefully this has been of help. Cheers.
Thanks, Pablo. It was awesome. Bye, everyone. We'll see you next time on Adobe Live. Bye.
See ya.